Well, boys and girls, check out what followed me home today. No, not Missy the cat. No, this is a PHILCO Model 18. I believe, but I'm not sure, that this old guy was made in 1934, but I'll confirm that in a little while by looking on the PHILCO radio gallery. But check it out, this thing's actually in really nice shape. Of course, there's always the rings on the top of any radio you bring home. But other than that, the cabinet looks pretty solid. There's really not any missing veneer. There's some places where it might not be exactly perfect, but a little refinishing will take care of that. I'm not sure. I think that's probably not the original speaker cloth, but that grill work is in good condition. And one of the legs has a split in it, but that can be fixed. Besides that, it looks pretty solid. The side's pretty much the same. I really like this style of cabinet. I've got some GEs and an RCA that have the 6 legs like this. I always like that kind of high boy. Let's take a look inside. All right, the chassis looks pretty complete. This model has a shadow meter, which is something I always like, and a 3-gang cap. And the tuning works nice and smoothly. Check that out. That's when PHILCO was using some decent sized transformers in their radios. Let's see, let me see how many tubes are in here. I'm not sure. I think it's 8 or 9. Let's take a look here. Let's see, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So it looks to me like an 8-tuber. It's got some neat components in there. Looks like the IF cans are in these big round cans. I'm not familiar with those. Looks like it has a nice choke or an interstage transformer. And dig this ground connector. You know what? This is the kind of connector I'm always looking for a lot of phono jacks for old radios. So I'll make sure I hold on to that. Speaker connector looks to be in good shape. The speaker itself looks to be in pretty good shape too. There's the output transformer. Basically, this is a nice looking radio, nice looking cabinet. I got it pretty cheap. I paid 40 bucks for it, so I think it was well worth the money. There's the tube lineup, and of course the the layout of the thing. The usual stickers. These are in good shape, and they're in a convenient spot where I can scan these. I'm going to scan them with my handheld scanner, and I'm trying to build a little database of decals, and then, I don't know what I'll do with them later. Maybe if folks need them down the road, I'll make them for people. But this is going to be a nice radio. Of course, it goes on the project list, but this one I'm going to want to do pretty soon because it's a nice radio, and I'm getting real close to the point where I can do my own and not always be working on other people's. All right, that's what hopped into the car this morning as I drove through a neighborhood. All right, let's get back to work now. When I solder something where I'm concerned about the component adjacent to it, attached to the same terminal, being damaged by excess heat, I use just a cheap alligator clip. Best heat sink in the world. Works really well. So I don't want to get this mica capacitor hot if I can help it. So I'll go ahead and put an alligator clip on the lead. And now I'm also going to be careful to not apply too much heat because I also don't want to overheat that potentiometer. But that can generally handle it. I think mica capacitors can handle a good amount of heat too, but sometimes you'll get components that cannot, and it's good to do this, especially if you're around things like film capacitors and such, where you just don't want to get those too hot. There's another example of where I want to be pretty careful. I had mentioned in the first video, I think, of this, maybe the second, that they were starting to get really tight with lead lengths on components. And that's really good for design, I'm sure, so I try to keep them as close as I can to it. But one of the downsides of that is that any heat I apply to that lead is going to dump right into that capacitor. And like I said, mica capacitors probably can handle a lot of heat, but I really don't want to test the theory. So here I am with the alligator clip right on the lead, but kind of far away from the solder joint, but between the solder joint and the component. That way excess heat that goes screaming down that lead won't get dumped into the cap. There's a strange capacitor, at least I think it's a capacitor, sort of hanging off of the band switch here. And it looks like an early sort of multi-packed component, because if you look real close there at the bottom of it, you can just see that wire going off. There's a wire that goes off to the band switch from the bottom. So there are two wires at the top, right there. You can see the connections right there. And then one going off at the bottom. Now, if you look real close at this, it looks an awful lot like it's a film capacitor encased in this wax sort of brick. But the capacitance that I'm seeing on the schematic would kind of make me think that it's not film, but mica. So I'm not sure what's going on with this capacitor, and if any of you knows what it is, I would love to know. Because the truth is, I don't really want to take it out if it's mica, but if it's film, I'll go ahead and replace it. But let me show you why I'm concerned. I believe that right there is the item. It's capacitor 21 and 21A. And if you look at the value, that sure doesn't look like anything I would find in a wax and paper cap. So I'm not quite sure what to make out of this, but I checked all the connections because they connect up to the band switch, and I checked those connections, B12 and B4, and the other one I believe connects to ground, which is position number A8 on the band switch. It gives me the map of the band switch right here in the schemo. So I'm looking at this, I'm pretty sure I have the right capacitor, and I know that the value is supposed to be 370 picofarads. But boy, I sure would be surprised if that's a paper and wax. There is the band switch. It's in 3 layers, 3 wafers, and they're numbered as I've drawn on here. Looking at it from this end, they're numbered starting at number 1, which is about the 7 o'clock position. And the layers are oriented in the way that I've drawn on this little diagram here. Well, there's the back side of that wax brick, and sure enough, I was right. It's 2 capacitors, 370 picofarads each. You see the terminals labeled there, A, B, and C. A is common to both capacitors, of course, and B and C are separate. And the more I'm looking at this, the more I'm thinking this might be like a metal foil and paper in the wax brick. So I'm not sure yet. The jury's still out. I was trying to remove it so that I could get to the band switch a little bit better. And this one side, one terminal, oh, you can't see it. But this one terminal here kind of broke off a little bit, but I can fix that. It's no big deal. I'll just do a coil method if I decide to use this thing. So let me know what you think, guys. Now I know what it is, tell me if you know for sure whether this is foil and paper or mica. I'm pretty sure that's not mica, but I want to ask anyway. And I've already got a call into PHILCO here in Salt Lake to see if they have any of these 370 picofarads. This radio only has one Bakelite block for capacitors, and that is the line filter capacitors. Each capacitor in that Bakelite block is a 0.01 microfarad going from either side of the line cord to ground. I'm going to melt the tar out of the block and put a couple of 0.01 safety caps in there. You must use safety caps, and these would be Y2 safety caps that I'm going to use. And then I'll go ahead and install the usual thermistor and fuse and line cord. Okay, everybody has their own way of doing these Bakelite blocks. I'll show you what I do, and you may have your own, and you know what? They're probably both equally legitimate. So let's go ahead and show you what I do. First thing, I like to remove the wires from the thing. I try really hard not to cut transformer wires, and so I'm going to go ahead and leave that one and try to get as much off of it as I can after I melt the solder off this thing. A lot of times what will happen, and you'll see it, the tar will start to ooze up through these little rivet holes as I remove the solder. Last thing I do is I will soak the solder off the hole where the rivet is, just to try and get as much of that out of there as I can. It makes it easier to remove the old capacitor. Now there are lots of people who I'm sure have a much better technique than I do on this. If somebody's not crazy for wanting it to look perfect underneath here, a lot of times I'll just not replace the Bakelite block. I'll just put a terminal strip in there, and the reason for that is you can see the capacitors and you can troubleshoot. But I totally understand if people want to keep these blocks in place for originality. That I get. This is one of those times when restuffing makes sense to me. Besides, usually these PHILCO chassis are pretty cramped, and so putting some caps inside these blocks and giving yourself the terminals that go with it is sometimes a good idea. Everybody talks about this being such a hard job, but it's really kind of easy if you do what I do. I'm doing it the lazy way, and I'll show you what that is, but it works really well. Alright, so get in there and snip that wire. Alright, now I'm going to go ahead and take that out. It's just a sheet metal screw. And you see, this will be the ground terminal, the ground side of each of the capacitors. You can see that it grounds through this ring here and through the screw into the chassis. Don't forget the little star washer that goes under the Bakelite block, between the Bakelite block and the chassis. It's kind of strange that it goes there. I almost think that was misplaced, but I don't know, I've seen them there before. I'm going to show you, I'm going to go out and set up to melt the tar out of this block. Like I said, I don't do this on every radio, it just depends on the customer, but I'm going to do it on this one just so I can show you, even though I don't think this customer would really care either way. Okay guys, we all have our secret weapon when it comes to doing these PHILCO Bakelite blocks. I'm no different, I have my secret weapon, and I'm going to show you what I do. It's a little different, I think, than what I've seen other people do, in that I use just an ordinary toaster oven. I picked this up at a thrift store for like $5, and so, wifey has her toaster oven that I don't touch. I wouldn't dare do this in there. In fact, I'm out in the garage right now. It's about almost 100 degrees here in Salt Lake City today. And so we have our toaster oven out in the garage so that when we, if we're going to heat, some space up, we'd rather it not be our nice air-conditioned kitchen. We'd rather it just be the old smelly garage. So her toaster oven's over here under a cover so it doesn't get dusty when it's not being used. And my toaster oven, I don't care if it's dusty or not. So I'm going to go ahead and set this up so you can see it, and I'll get started. So let me tell you the first thing I do. I have a little tray. Of course, toaster ovens usually come with a tray, and which I've lined with aluminum foil. Now this isn't perfect. I don't expect to never make a mess with this, but I do my best. And what I do with the aluminum foil is it's a place to collect most of the tar, and so every now and then I'll change out the aluminum foil, and there you go. I got it's clean. In between changing out the aluminum foil, what do I care if the tar sits in there? I just leave it sit in there. It melts and re-solidifies every time I do this, so what? So I have this in there. I'm going to take the Bakelite block and I set it on there, no surprises here, upside down. Okay? And I had the little cylinder part for the screw I just put in the grate there. Just set it on there upside down, slide the tray in, I'm ready to go. Okay? Now I set my temperature right around 400 degrees, It sounds extreme, but it won't hurt that Bakelite a bit. Trust me, I've done this many times before. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on the oven and let her heat up. Now it's going to get smelly like crazy out here, and that's okay. I'm out in the garage. It's another reason not to do it in the house. I used to do it in the basement, and that earned me lots of groans of protest from upstairs. So I've learned to do this out in the garage. You probably should too if you want to stay friends with your family. All right, I'm going to let this go for a bit. Right now it is, let's mark right now, and then I will check on it in about 10 minutes. I'll let this warm up. Okay, let's take a look. We've gone about 10 minutes or so, maybe 8 minutes. We see any tar melting out yet? Okay, if you look real close, you can just now see some oozing starting to happen in the center, in the middle of that capacitor block. You can kind of see that tar starting to glob and drip down out of there. Once it starts to come out, it actually comes out pretty quickly, and all you have to do is keep an eye on it and watch for it to stop running out. And you'll see, because it'll create a pretty good sized black puddle underneath the condenser, and you'll see it'll start sheeting out. You can see it just right now sheeting out off of the side of the condenser. And once it gets to that point, it goes pretty quickly. We're almost there. A few more minutes and this should be done. This will come out surprisingly clean when it's all finished. Now I bumped up the temp to 425 a couple of minutes ago, and that does sometimes 400 works, sometimes 425, but you can see that glob of tar coming out the bottom of this. At some point it'll start to become more of a trickle of tar, and that's when I'll quit. I gotta tell you, it's hotter than heck right now in my garage, and I'm standing in front of a toaster oven. Reminds me of my steel mill days. See if you can see that glob. Okay, the biggest part of it just dropped off. And after this point, it's going to start to be more of a trickle, and I'll just get in there and I'll wipe it out with some paper towels wrapped around the jaws of a needle nose pliers. And it really does a pretty good job. And then when I go downstairs, it'll still be warm. I'll take it downstairs and I'll wipe it out with a little bit of lacquer thinner while it's still warm, not real hot, but warm. And that will clean the rest of it out, and it'll be clean as anything when I'm done. I'm going to go ahead and open this up and take it out of there. Now, I usually will leave the heat on until after I've got this thing all cleaned up. Sometimes I want to put it back in. So all I do is I'll take some paper towel like this, and I'll just get it where I can get inside the block and wipe it out. That's it. That's all I have to do. It'll smell up the place like crazy, guys. You see, just kind of get in there, and it will heat right through your gloves really fast. So you want to handle this quickly. There's the capacitor. I just dropped it on the floor. A lot of times the capacitor will fall out in the toaster oven, but this time it didn't. And you just take a paper towel and just wipe it out. And because it's so hot and this Bakelite stays hot for a while, it's pretty easy to get it clean. You can see it's pretty clean in there. That's all there is to it. Now it's going to take a good 20 minutes for this thing to cool down. Okay, so let's turn that off. All right, so that's all there is to it. I'm going to let it cool for a few minutes and then I'll show you. Here is the Bakelite block. like I said, it's pretty clean. You can see the inside is nice and clean. Now I'll wipe out the inside with some lacquer thinner to finish that up. And there's the top of it. I'll clean that up with some lacquer thinner, and so I'll go ahead and mount the capacitors that I want inside of here, and it's ready to go. Perfection is not required. Whatever you come up with is going to be better than it was before you started. I'll do this off camera, but I'll show you what I'm going to do. These little stubs of wire that are left over right here, you see this one right here. I'll heat this bugger up and I'll get the last little bits of solder off, and I'll get those little bits of wire off of there. So that what I'll do is I'll run the capacitor right up through the hole and wrap it around the terminal, and that's the end. That's all I have to do. I don't have any 0.01 microfarad safety capacitors, but I do have these 0.005 microfarad. And you know what, with line filter capacitors, it makes no difference really what you use within reason, and a 0.005 will work just fine. So what you do, go ahead and just bend the leads. Oops, just bend the leads. Don't even put any shrink tubing on them. Drop the safety capacitor in there like that. Okay, nothing to it. Okay, got two wires, two leads going to the ground, one from each of the capacitors, and then each capacitor has a lead going to its positive. Doesn't matter which one is which, they're both 0.005 in this case. On the schematic they say 0.01, but that's fine. And if you look down in there, you can kind of see what it looks like in there. All right, nothing to it. I'll go ahead and solder these, and I'll mount this back in the radio. That's all there is to it, guys. That's it. Okay, so I'm gonna get on to the next steps now, putting a fuse in it. All right, so let me get to that. I'll show you after I've done it. I'm gonna pull this cord out of here and remove some of this nastiness. I've still got two paper caps in here to replace, and then I'll mount all that stuff, and we'll be done underneath this chassis. Well, not really done. We'll be done with the wiring work. I kind of forgot about these two caps right here, and I'll get back to them shortly, but since I started this, I want to go ahead and finish this part here. I was getting bored with replacing capacitors anyway. I just have those two and I'll be done with them. So I put a fuse in right here, fuse holder, and it comes out right next to where the cord's going to come in. So the line will come in. I'll do that in a minute. I'll show you. Go through the fuse, go over here, follow this white wire, and goes to a thermistor, a CL90. Now, I watched a video Bob Anderson did recently, and he said that CL90 actually needs a higher current than what this radio probably will draw. So I'll see if the voltages are low, then I'll know that's part of it, and I'll go ahead and replace it with like a CL70 or something like that. I think that's a better choice maybe. Goes through the thermistor, and then it goes through this terminal. It goes through this terminal on the capacitor and comes to this terminal right here, this blue wire. It goes off to the switch. It returns via this red wire, okay, right here, and then goes to the transformer. All right, that's one side. The other side, the line cord will come in, go right to this terminal here with the red wire. This goes to this terminal on the capacitor, okay, and then goes straight into the transformer, okay. I buy my line cord on Amazon. I buy it in bulk. It's a whole lot cheaper that way, and this is pretty good line cord. It's basically lamp cord. It's 250 feet of it. and it looks like it's 18 gauge. So that it's 300 volt. I forget the current rating on the thing, but it's going to be fine. Believe me, this radio won't draw enough current to be a problem with this. I think the current rating on it is something like 9 amps. Let me go ahead and see how much of this I need in here. As a standard, the side of the cord with the little ribs on it like so is supposed to go to the neutral, and the side of the cord that is plain or has the printing on it, you know, given the specs of the cord, should go to the hot side. It's a minor thing on these non-polarized plug radios, but you know, we should do it right. Okay, so a UL knot, I always get screwed up doing these UL knots, so I'm going to do my best here. Okay, so you make 2 loops like this, and I think one, I always get it wrong the first time. One goes in there, one goes in here, and you kind of pull it. It's like a little square knot kind of deal. I was never a Boy Scout, guys. Hell, I didn't even make it through Cub Scouts. Alright, so that's just a strain relief. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a grommet in here. I've got a strain relief type of grommet that I'll put in there later. Right now I just want to get this in place. It hasn't rained much in weeks. We had a few sprinkles the last few days. In this goofy city, and all the hillbillies got to light off fireworks. We live in a desert. It's like a tinderbox. There's wildfires burning up California. And the idiots in Salt Lake City are blowing off fireworks. Here we go. So line comes in, goes through the fuse, through the white wire to the thermistor, to this terminal on the cap, through the white wire, off to this blue wire going off to the power switch, coming back from the power switch with the red wire, goes to the transformer and in. The other side of the line cord comes in, goes to the red wire, goes to this terminal, goes in the transformer. We're good. I don't know how many feet of line cord you guys like to use. This is a floor model, so I usually use about 6 feet or so, 7 feet, something like that. Usually I just stretch my arms out fully once, that's about 5 feet, and then I add a couple feet to that. I don't know if there's a standard. Maybe one of you guys knows and can tell me. This terminal strip doesn't really want to grab onto the solder. It's old. Sometimes that's the only thing that's bad about using, you know, parts you buy at a surplus stores. Sometimes they've been sitting around a while and they've had a chance to get like a film of oxide on it, and the rosin flux will generally take care of that, but you got to remember to use it. And you have to run the soldering temperature just a little higher when you're doing that too. Alright, let me get these 2 caps, and I can call it a day under here. It's kind of late on Friday night. In about an hour, it's about 11 o'clock, in about an hour will be my birthday, man. So, happy birthday to me. And I feel happy about that because my daughter is coming all the way from Los Angeles to visit me and be with me on my birthday. And my son lives in Salt Lake. And the last time my son and my daughter, my wife and I were all together in one place was Christmas time. So this is kind of cool. And I'm going to dig out a couple of the video cameras and a couple of microphones and get a little bit of it recorded. Okay, let's do a quick walk around the chassis, see what we got done. So we got all sorts of resistors, capacitors, wires, everything replaced. So let me pull this out of the way so you can see around it. That goes off to the speaker. So this is the power. This goes off to the power switch when I remount that push button assembly. So I double checked after all the work I did, all the coils again everywhere. I checked the antenna transformer, I checked the oscillator transformer, I checked the output transformer, checked the main power transformer. I checked, there are 3 IF cans on this. I checked all 3 of those, primaries and secondaries. So everything's okay, everything's good. I checked the resistors on this can dome. I know a lot of people like to put, beat up on can domes. Truth is, I have heard about it, but I have never run across a bad one. They've always worked for me. I always check them, and they're never exactly what the schematic says, but that's okay. Neither are carbon resistors. So I checked the can dome, and it's okay. I did put this goofy wax sort of brick capacitor back in place. If I find there's a problem, then I'll go ahead and pluck that out. I've got some mica caps waiting for me at PHILCO, so I've got them I can replace. These are supposed to be 370. I got some 390s at PHILCO. I think that will be okay if I put those in there. Let's see here. What else have I done? All kinds of new wires. I marked the B+. I used red wire for B+, and I marked it because there are red wires for other stuff too, with these little plus symbols all along the wire, so that when I'm troubleshooting this radio or just testing it, I can find the B+. There's an 8 microfarad capacitor in the circuit too. I'll show you in the circuit diagram. That also has a wire coming off of it that's higher voltage, and I just put these little blue tick marks on it so I could separate the two as I'm looking at the radio. I usually do that if I have a lot of the same color in there, then I'll differentiate by putting little tick marks along one wire. Doesn't look like much now, it's easy to follow, but when I have that trimmer assembly here and I have the push button assembly here, then it's going to be hard to follow these wires. But if I can see at this end, okay, the tick marks are here, here's the tick marks, well, okay, that's the wire. It makes it much easier. So I do it on a lot of stuff. You see all over the place I got that. The tuning right here has this little shaft. I'm going to go ahead and clean and lubricate that. I'll deoxit this band switch while I can get to everything more easily, and I'll operate it a bunch of times. I will deoxit both of these potentiometers. Same deal, operated a bunch of times, so I can get to those things right now. And then I'll get to where I'm ready to... In fact, before I deoxit anything, I'm probably going to paint this thing. I don't want deoxit oil floating around everywhere just before I paint. So I'll go ahead and paint the top side of this chassis after I deal with the rust. I wanted to show you where I am on the bottom. Some of these wires here I'm not going to be able to hook back up till I put those push button assemblies back in. Okay, so that's where she stands right now. I know it's been a video a little light on content, and that's just because watching me replace wires would be really dull. So I hope that what I have shown you is interesting enough, and now we'll move on to taking care of the top side of this chassis. I'll go ahead and shut this video down now. It is Friday night, about 10 after 11, and I'm gonna get ready for my daughter to arrive here shortly. And so from your western outpost in Salt Lake City, this is Michael, and that's all for now.